All right, well, welcome everybody to a webinar put on by the Center for Rural Affairs about grazing lands and land transitions. I'm Andrew Tonies with the Center for Rural Affairs. And we have guest speakers today, Jessica Grosskopf with the UNL Extension Land Link Program, Alexa Davis with Nebraska Department of Water, Environment, and Energy, and she manages the Nebraska Grazing Exchange, and Jana Ingerson-Laws with the Farm Service Agency to talk about CRP. I will share my screen here. And just a brief introduction to the Center for Rural Affairs. Can you all see that? Yep, okay, thank you. I obviously am not Cynthia Farmer, but she is my colleague counterpart in Iowa who put these slides together. The Center for Rural Affairs is not geographically limited to the Midwest, but that is where we do the majority of our work. We were established in Nebraska in 1973, so we've been around for a while, based in Lyons, Nebraska. We've had a presence in Iowa since 2015, and we also have staff in South Dakota and Minnesota. The Center for Rural Affairs stands up for family farmers and ranchers, new business owners, and rural communities. For over 50 years, we've been a leading force engaging people to build a better rural future. And our mission is to establish strong rural communities, social and economic justice, environmental stewardship, and genuine opportunity for all, while engaging people in decisions that affect the quality of their lives and the future of their communities. Just a brief summary of our three main program departments. Our farm and community team works at building local capacity through training, building leaders, and hands-on assistance in farm and food, equity, and community development. Our small business lending team, they do a great job of small business development through microloans and business coaching throughout rural Nebraska. And then our rural policy program pursue policies that enhance our rural way of life, which includes ensuring economic security for rural families, stability for family farms and ranchers, and investments in conservation and the protection of our environment and climate. And this work is supported by a grant from USDA FSA. And with that, I will turn it over to Jessica.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm so glad that we can talk about the importance of connecting people like you with new and beginning landowners. Andrew, I don't have sharing capabilities yet.
Yep, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm kind of a Luddite when it comes to this stuff, so bear with me. I think I practiced this earlier, I swear, so it would go faster. There, now you should be able to.
Okay. You have to end your share so I can start mine.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're cooking with gas. All right. Well, like I said, my name is Jessica Grosskopf. I have the pleasure of working with the Nebraska Land Link program. And the Land Link program basically links landowners with what we call land seekers, which are typically new and beginning producers who are looking for opportunities to begin or expand their farming operations and ranching operations. So part of the question is why? Why do we have the Nebraska Land Link program? And I'm a very visual person, and you might be wondering, what do these visuals have to do with linking landowners and land seekers? So there's two groups that we're really targeting here. First are landowners. And when I talk to landowners about the possibility of passing their operation on or helping a new and beginning producer to someone who's not related to them, often they talk about the feeling of when someone knows that their land is available It feels often like the vultures are circling. And I don't like that feeling for landowners. We want them to have opportunity. We want them to have decision-making power. And so I often think that it might not necessarily be the animal in the picture here, but maybe someone outside of the picture who just feels like there's so much pressure, especially from communities because farmland and ranch land is so competitive here in the state of Nebraska. From a land seeker perspective, often the land seekers in the database are more like the seals on the buoy over there, but maybe the seals that are actually in the water because maybe they're a part of a family operation that frankly just doesn't have enough space to support another family unit. So they have the experience, they have the drive, they are very motivated, but frankly, there's just not enough space for them. And so, how do we respect both parties and how do we connect both parties? And that's what the Nebraska Land Link Service does is provides this opportunity where both perspectives are honored and where we can really create these relationships that are really, really interesting. So our job at the Nebraska Land Link program is to connect landowners with land seekers. And there's the why. Why is this important? We know that land access is the most challenging issue facing new and beginning producers. Bar none, when you talk to someone who is trying to get into farming or ranching, the ability to lease, buy, or potentially be gifted property is very, very minimal. The other thing we know is that we know that about 55% of existing farmers and ranchers are not retiring because they have not identified a successor. So there's either no one in their family or no one in their immediate community that they are comfortable making that transition to. And as Nebraskans, we know that vibrant rural communities rely on agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting. So this is really important to keep rural Nebraska strong, and especially our rural communities and our ranching communities. So just a little bit of data just to kind of set the tone. This is not just a feeling. We know that about 40%, give or take, of agricultural land is actually leased. So again, that's a really big picture. And you say, well, that's not too bad, right? You got a 40% shot to go out and potentially lease property, which is part of that land access puzzle. However, if we get a little bit deeper into the data, and we specifically look at how much pasture land is rented, we see that only about a quarter of US pasture land is rented. So it's much more likely that a rancher owns and operates their own property and instead of having that opportunity to rent, which means as a new and beginning producer, as a land seeker within the database, these young ranchers are extremely interested in the opportunity to have access to this property, and they have a 1 in 4 shot of being able to rent this property, which means 3/4 of them will likely be purchasing or inheriting this property. Now, we know a little bit more about how owner operators actually inherit land. And so as we look at this, everybody says, well, boy, those families that already have young people, they're just going to pass that down. And that's not necessarily true. So same survey from USDA. This is the 10-year total survey, excuse me, the total survey. And we're looking forward to new results of this from the most recent census. But what this survey says is that only about a quarter of land is inherited or gifted to these young people. So again, as we look at the challenge of bringing on new families, bringing on new and beginning producers into these communities, we're really talking about a large capital investment. We're really talking about the challenges of how competitive that market is. And it's not just a feeling, it's embedded in these statistics. So what do we do here at the Nebraska Land Link program and how can you be involved? So our program is an application process for both landowners and land seekers. So you can get on our website, and I'll share that here again with you. It's cap.unl.edu/landlink, and both parties apply. So as a landowner, you can go in and basically tell us about your property and what you're interested in terms of helping a new and beginning producer get started. What happens with that application process is you fill it out, we review it, and then we'll do a phone interview with you to know what exactly you're looking for within a land seeker. After we have interviewed you, we'll go back to our database and we actually do what we call matching, where we review the applications of potential land seekers in the database, looking for common attributes between the two parties. So we'll go through our database, and right now it's about 20 land seekers per landowner application, and we'll pick the top 3 to 5, and we'll send those applications to you. In addition to the matching process, we also provide education. So trying to provide both parties with the latest information related to, tax credits here in Nebraska, lease information, also new and beginning farmer programs that are available that might help both parties throughout this relationship. So a little bit about preparing your application. It takes about an hour to complete an application well. We really need you to be honest about your needs and expectations for landowners. This includes what your ultimate estate plan for your property is, because that's an important consideration for a land seeker. They want to know, is this just a lease agreement? Is there an opportunity to buy, and what that looks like? And then, of course, that 5 to 10 minute phone call interview from our team. We have had some success here in Nebraska. The program has been operating since 2021 through Nebraska Extension. We have 2 successful matches, and I count a match successful when they have been working with one another for more than a year. And these are just some of the comments from those successful matches about having someone that they know take care of the land and preserve it, and how they were able to select basically who they worked with rather than just doing an all call from their community. So really great success stories here in Nebraska from the Nebraska Land Link program. This map probably needs to be updated, but this gives you an idea of where the land seekers are at within the state. As you can see, we're covering most counties in the state at this time. And again, we can probably dabble in a few more. Again, these young people are exciting, they're interested, and they're motivated to find opportunities for themselves. And a lot of them already have farming and ranching experience. So again, this is our website, cap.unl.edu/landlink, and I'm happy to work with you through your application process and talk to you more about the opportunities that are within our system. All right, Andrew, back to you.
Thank you, Jessica. Can I just ask one quick follow-up? I'm kind of curious, when
Yeah.
you're looking for those 3 to 5 applicants that you're going to pass on to the landowner, like what criteria are you looking at to match them up?
So it depends on really what the landowner is offering and what the land seeker is looking for. So for example, if you have regenerative practices in mind, I'm not going to send you someone who doesn't have that kind of language within their packet. So that's why we do here in Nebraska, we do kind of hand matching where we're actually reading through each of the applications. So you're not just getting everyone in your county, especially if you're in one of those counties or one of those areas that has a lot of land seekers. We're filtering through it for you and handing you those 3 to 5 that we think are the best match for you. And if there's not someone in that first 3 to 5, we can go back through the system, have you refine what you're looking for, and we can continue to look through the system to see if there's someone there. And it's not just local people. We do have land seekers who are willing to move for the right opportunity. So we kind of start with your local people, and then we'll kind of expand that area out based again on those specific criteria that you're looking for.
Okay, well, that's great. So it's an individualized approach, and you're not just checking boxes.
Mhm. Yep, it's a very a very labor intensive process for us to go through the matching process.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jessica. Okay, now we will move on to Alexa Davis with the Nebraska Grazing Land Exchange.
Hi, good morning. I'm gonna quickly share my screen. And, oh, my computer's going slow right now. Okay, I wanted to touch on 2 websites actually. The first being the Nebraska Strategic Ag Coalition website. So the Nebraska Strategic Ag Coalition website is a collaboration between a lot of different state, local, and federal agencies here to provide existing information for Nebraska producers all across the state. So I just want to touch on a few different things that I think would be noteworthy for Nebraska producers in this grazing transition. The first is that we have a database that is different cost shares that are available in Nebraska, and there's a ton of different options here for livestock, row crops, specialty crops in your current operation, and then maybe different practices that you're interested in using or implementing. And I just clicked on livestock and I'm interested in grazing and pasture. And there's a whole list of different cost share programs that are available to producers in Nebraska. And so it'll have the program name, some overview about it, and then the different practices that are associated with it. And on the icons for these different cost shares, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse right now, but for a greener world, this has a symbol of a combination, which means it's a combination of funds. Whereas this carbon practice right here is more private funds. So you can look and see where the different funding sources for stackability, which is really interesting because a lot of programs that are offered within the state of Nebraska, where it's local, private, state, federal, can be stacked. And so when I look at the grazing cost shares, I just kind of clicked on this American Sustainable Business Institute, the Growing Grass Project. And we have different tiers of information for different cost shares across the state, including farm eligibility, money matters, contracting information, and technical information. And so with the farm eligibility, it'll have a start date, it'll have the eligible practices. If it's restricted to certain counties within the state, it'll have that. It'll have the payment schedule or price when it's into the money matters. The contracting information is data that's collected, if there's a contract length or length amount of time. And then the technical information gives a little bit of information about who this program is working for, kind of the estimated outcomes and all of that, which we think is pretty exciting to see this level of detail for different cost shares across the state. So there's that aspect of the website. We also are trying to work on producer networks. And so there's a lot of existing networks that are all across the state if you're wanting to get involved in your farming community. So I'll touch on the Grazing Exchange, but there's TAPS, the Nebraska Soil Health Coalition, Connected Ag. There's a lot of local associations. There's a ton of different networks that are existing. This list is really long on the website. So if you're interested in getting involved in your community, you can look through that. And then we also have a resource library with different topics all across the state, different regions, different commodities. And if you just click, you can filter by if you're wanting to read a podcast, see a video, look at a PDF. And here on the website, we've got 17 different labeled grazing resources. There's a bunch of different resources that are added to this database for different producers. If you're interested in some light reading, some education, you know, if you're driving and you're bored, you're like, oh, well, I'm interested in seeing the Nebraska Game and Parks biologist map. I don't know. That's something that I would do if I was driving. But I wanted to really focus on the Nebraska Grazing Exchange website. So the coalition has funded this Grazing Exchange website, and this website is a free interactive dashboard for Nebraska producers, and it's for producers that either have livestock or land to be able to connect to integrate the livestock into grassland management. And so this is a free database for producers to sign up. You just go into the create an account and you'll add how many acres you have, what kind of management you have, if you have water, if you've got fence, what kind of crops you have. And on the other side, if you have livestock, you can put how many head of cattle you have, different information about that. And it'll generate an icon. And the icon, when you click on it, you can see my little test icon here for the rangeland. It'll have that information of acres, grazing season, if it's organic, blah, blah, blah. And then if you were interested in connecting with a landowner that has you know, pasture, then you would click on connect with the contact, and then you'll get that person's contact information. And so you can talk to them outside of the website. You can meet up with them at a coffee shop and say like, hey, I live like 20 miles away. Can I stop by? Can we have a chat? Blah, blah, blah. But it's a free website for producers. And the interesting thing about this site is that it actually came out of the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition. And there's producers all over the United States and producers within Canada too. And so we always just say, you know, if you're in Nebraska and you're wanting to utilize this for, you know, using some land in South Dakota, make sure that you know the restrictions of crossing state boundaries. But it's just interesting to see that this is a network that's all across the nation, not just in Nebraska. But we're very excited to have a Nebraska page specifically for Nebraska producers. And that's all I have. I know I went pretty quick. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, Andrew.
No, thank you, Alexa. I know in the farmers I talk to in the area in eastern Nebraska I live, I hear quite often that these corn and bean farmers would love to have cattle grazing stocks, corn stalks in the wintertime, but they don't know anybody near enough to make that happen. So this is a great resource for people like that, connect folks who have the cattle and folks who have the stocks.
Yeah, the Grazing Coalition, you know, we had conversations with them about the Grazing Exchange website, and they were like, yeah, we just use Facebook. And they were like, sometimes that's just not effective and looking for resources. So we think that the Grazing Exchange website's pretty cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, now it is Jana's turn with the Farm Service Agency.
Andrew, can you see my screen okay? I'll make sure it's working all right.
Yep, got it right here.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jana Ingerson-Laws. I'm the Conservation Specialist at the State Office with Nebraska Farm Service Agency, USDA. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about what we can offer from the federal government. We have CRP. I think most people are familiar with the Conservation Reserve Program, but there's also three kinds of CRP in all reality. We've got continuous, which is things like filter strips, kind of those environmentally sensitive areas. We've got general sign up, which usually takes a bidding process. Those are going to be kind of our bigger fields, bigger acreages offered. But one of the best programs we've seen success with since it came about in about 2014 is the Grassland CRP. This is considered a working lands program. So that's what I'm going to talk to you today about, and a little bit about TIP, which is a transition incentives program. Again, my name is Jana Ingerson-Laws, and here's my contact info. And then Pat Lechner would be our Price Support and Conservation Program Chief at the State Office, and here his information is there also. Okay, so what is Grassland CRP? What makes this program different than regular CRP? It's, again, working lands. That's what's important. You get to work the land still. We don't have the same restrictions on this CRP as we do our regular CRP. Cropping history is not going to be required to enroll in Grassland CRP. Haying and or grazing or harvesting for seed production is allowed subject to an approved conservation plan. And that's what makes this type of CRP very unique and very appealing, is that you're going to be able to hay and graze. We're still paying you an annual rental payment. It's not going to be as high as our continuous or general CRP because we're basically paying grazing value, what the land rate is under NAS values for grazing in that county. Cost share is available also under this program. So normal CRP, we pay cost share for things like implementing seed practices, but under Grassland CRP, we can pay cost share for fencing and livestock water developments if there is a resource concern. It's important to know too that haying and grazing isn't required. We get that question quite a bit. You can hay and graze it, but there's sometimes people just want to enroll Grassland CRP for wildlife habitat benefits. So that's still an option too. You don't have to work the land. It can still get put under a Grassland CRP contract. Okay, what are some of the expectations we expect once you enroll in Grassland CRP? That cover still has to be kept maintained. We need it to be maintained and free of noxious weeds and invasive species. We cannot cultivate or develop any of that land that's under a grassland CRP contract. We need to know when there's ownership or operator changes. That's important because if you sell the land, that contract is still on the land. It doesn't just go away. And so if a succession doesn't occur to that contract, there could be some refunds due from that original participant on the CRP contract. We still need to report the acreage on that grassland CRP locally at the office. Following an approved conservation plan, we still monitor and make sure we're following any grazing plans, etc. And these are going to be 10 or 15-year contracts, or the time frame we look at when we enroll in grassland CRP. Okay, what's eligible? How can we get land into grassland CRP? So eligibility wise, we're looking at rangeland and pasture land, which grazing is the predominant use. Again, you don't have to graze it, but that's kind of what we're looking at for historic purposes. Was this used as rangeland or pasture land? We cannot allow a tree canopy that's over 5%. So normally if the trees are kind of scattered, we're fine. Once we start getting condensed stands of trees, we're going to have to draw those out. Any water, ponds, etc., those are not eligible either because they're not considered range or pasture. So what we would do is you'd sit down with your local office. We want to look at those maps very close, especially as we get into, I've seen 4,000 acre CLUs, what we call a common land unit. So we really do need to do our diligence when we're enrolling in the program to make sure to draw some of these areas out that wouldn't be eligible. Because if we were to try to get an offer in and discover there's a huge pond out there, it could kick you out of eligibility. So we want to do our diligence when we enroll to look at those maps and only include that rangeland and pasture land that's eligible. Expiring CRP, that's a question we often get. Can we put maybe like a native grass practice we had under a general CRP into grassland CRP? And the answer is yes, that does qualify. If we've got an expiring CRP contract, you should be eligible to go into grassland CRP. Again, ineligible land are those forested or woodland areas that exceed a 5% tree canopy. Any land that might be under an easement already that protects the land from a conservation. So if it already has restrictions on it that says you can't produce ag commodities, etc., that's not going to be eligible to go into grassland CRP because it's already under an easement. If you've already enrolled that land in an active NRCS, CSP, or EQIP contract, that's also considered ineligible land. So what do we have for a practice? We call this CP-88. CP stands for conservation practice. So when we talk grassland CRP, we're looking at CP-88 permanent grasses and legumes. Again, it's going to allow you to graze with the conservation plan. It can allow for haying, mowing, or harvesting for seed production subject to that conservation plan. We can also plan fire suppression in there, fire-related rehabilitation, and construction of fire breaks. So that's something we can plan into that CP-88 when we do the conservation plan with NRCS. Okay, what does grassland CRP look like in Nebraska right now? We have, again, highly successful story on grassland CRP. It's really, when you look at the charts, general and continuous kind of stay steady, if not a little decline, where grassland CRP numbers have just climbed and climbed and climbed over the years since this program has been available. We have a total of about 2.4 million acres enrolled, which tells us this is a good, successful program. That's total CRP enrollment. Sorry about that. The total in grassland alone is 1.8. So you can look at the chunk there, and about half of our total CRP enrollment is comprised of grassland CRP acreage. Unfortunately, we did just have a sign up. So at this point in time today in September, we are not taking any new offers for grassland CRP, but I still wanted to be here to inform everybody of this program and what you might be able to look for down the road. So we did do a sign up. July 14th is when we did our sign up. It was considered sign up 207. We had a kind of a condensed time frame this year to sign up. From July 14th to August 8th is the deadline to submit offers. Nationwide, we had about 810,000 acres accepted. Nebraska was the highest state acceptance acreage, 151,000 acres, 594 offers. We are kind of up against a hurdle this year because we are working on a farm bill extension from the 18 Farm Bill, and the next slide will kind of summarize that. Basically, the Farm Bill cap from the 18 Farm Bill caps CRP at 27 million acres. We kind of had all these condensed signups and very limited acres in, because currently we're at 25.8 million acres with our cap. So it didn't leave us much room this year to put a ton of new CRP in. We still had a pretty successful rate on grassland CRP. It might have just been a little bit more competitive than it was a year ago due to the cap that we're facing on those acres. CRP authority is going to lapse on September 30th this month if they don't pass some kind of farm bill extension or new farm bill. I have no updates as far as the new farm bill. So we'll wait and see what happens on September 30th. Last year, I know it took a few months before anything was passed and we could open CRP back up. So time will tell if we have something by September 30th or not. We'll just have to keep watching and see what gets passed by that date. Otherwise, if we lose authority, we're going to have to wait to do any kind of new CRP actions until authority is granted. Okay, that brings us to TIP. TIP stands for Transition Incentive Program. So TIP creates opportunities to ensure those expiring CRP contracts are used to support the next generation of producers by incentivizing transfer of land access and ownership. Owners and operators who qualify under TIP are eligible to receive basically 2 more years of annual rental payments after the contract has expired, provided that transition is not to a family member. The transition needs to also be to a veteran, beginning, or socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher. It really gives that landowner an opportunity, if they're on that contract, to get some more income for 2 years while they transition that CRP land into a new operator. The owner or operator needs to have an agreement to sell, have a contract to sell, or lease the land for a minimum of 5 years to that veteran, beginning, or SDA farmer or rancher before the TIP begins. Enrollment in TIP usually occurs anytime during the 2-year period before the scheduled expiration date. Normally, we're taking applications 2 years before that contract expires. And then the deadline, absolute deadline, is August 15th normally of the year of expiration, so we can get those plans ready. And that beginning farmer or rancher that gets put on that contract into TIP, they actually can transition that into ag production. They can continue to graze it. So what they'll be doing is they'll work with NRCS to form a conservation plan of what that land transition is going to look like from being CRP to whatever else they're planning to do. We can allow people to graze, convert to row crop. If they want to move it over into CRP, it's a possibility. But most people tend to go into a grazing plan, or they may be transitioning that into a cropland status. This year, it's important to know that TIP was not authorized under fiscal year 2025. Unfortunately, with changes of administration, it had been put on pause and we were not authorized to do TIP this fiscal year. I'm really hoping maybe with that next farm bill that we get, that TIP will be authorized and we'll have news on TIP and its availability. But at this point in time, we were not able to accept TIP applications during this fiscal year 2025. And that's all I have, Andrew.
Thank you, Jana. Just a couple of quick follow-ups. I'm curious about you talked about the approved conservation plan for grassland CRP. What factors are you looking at when you're coming up with a conservation plan with a landowner?
So NRCS, our sister agency, is the one that's going to sit down with that landowner, and it's really based on their plan and their objectives. Yet we still have to follow kind of our practice standards. Most of you are probably familiar with NRCS practice standards. So there's still going to be limitations. We can't allow overstocking, overgrazing, etc. But it's going to come down to NRCS sitting down with that participant to decide what it looks like on that land. As long as we're meeting all of our practice standards and not overgrazing, etc., we're going to be able to make that work for them.
Okay, that's great. So once again, not checking boxes, but kind of an individualized approach.
Correct. Yep.
Good. And then does the grassland CRP or any of the other types of CRP, are they able to qualify for the CRP-TIP program, or is it just one type of CRP that can do that?
It's any type of CRP. Good question, Andrew. So general, continuous, or grassland, anything under a CRP contract is going to possibly be eligible to go into TIP. We have to, of course, always check our owner eligibility, and that beginning farmer, rancher, SDA farmer, rancher eligibility has to be verified. But as long as everybody's eligible, we can transition either grassland, continuous, or general CRP contracts under TIP.
Okay, great. And well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everybody's time and effort today. I do want to just add one quick little plug for your NRCS local working groups are a good way to advocate as a farmer for changes to programs, federal programs that influence you. So you can look out for those local working groups. You can contact your local NRCS office. They usually happen in the wintertime. I want to say like February would be typical. I think that's usually when they happen. But anyways, that's a good way to get involved as farmers and make your concerns and opinions known. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.